It amazes me that Christians claim that the Gospels were written by eyewitness accounts, when it is quite evident, even by their own church fathers, if they actually did the study, to realize that it was not written by eyewitness accounts. And I'm only going to use three of your own church fathers who created your Gospels, or created your canon, I should say. And that would be Tertullian, Irenaeus, and Justin Martyr. And I'm going to go from the furthest out to the closest in. Tertullian basically is the one that solidified, for the most part, which four Gospels were going to wind up being the Gospels. These Gospels were canonized after the writings of Tertullian, claiming that these should be the ones that should be considered to be the Gospels. And then later on by Athanasius, they were more confirmed in 369, as he espoused for 25 years that these should be the Gospels. So I guess I did add a fourth one in there with Athanasius in and around 369. But it is based on the writings of Tertullian that Athanasius disseminated his letter every year, stating which Gospels should be the four Gospels and what should become the canon. But Tertullian was mainly concerned about the four Gospels at the time frame, wasn't so concerned about the other writings of Paul and the epistles and that sort of thing in Revelations. So Tertullian is roughly around 200 CE time frame. Now, about 20 years earlier than that, you have Irenaeus. Irenaeus, around 180 CE, is the one who named the Gospels the names to which they have today: Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. It was Irenaeus at 180 CE that gave them their names. The reason why and to give you an example, the reason why he gave what is called Matthew, the naming of Matthew, is because the primary person in the story, as far as the apostles are concerned, was Matthew, and how he recruited the tax collector Matthew. And since in his writing, Matthew is the most Jewish type writing, and the rest of them are more Greek, it is believed that Matthew is based on a writing called the Papias. And so that is why that one is named after Matthew. To go even further, Luke is named Luke because Luke was believed to be a disciple of Paul and was writing, and his writing were closest in resemblance of Paul's writing, whereas Mark's writings are more like what they believe Peter would have been saying, and was written by a disciple of Peter. So therefore, that is why they're this way. Now, there was a Gospel of Peter, but the reason why Irenaeus doesn't mention the Gospel of Peter is because earlier in 150, Justin Martyr had spoke about the Gospel of Peter and declared the Gospel of Peter to be heresy. And so in order to link Peter, they believe that the writer of Mark was a disciple of Peter. And in that way, they're getting Peter's point of view, but written through the Gospel of Mark. But Justin Martyr didn't name any of the books Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. He just called all of them as a collection the memoirs of the apostles. And this also incorporated other books that were not later placed in the canon, that Irenaeus and Tertullian, and then on up to Athanasius, that you get to. So before they started, trimming it down. So Justin Martyr was aware of and read and talked about different Gospels, but just didn't give him all so much name. Gospel of Peter is one of the only ones that he mentions by name. Everything else is just memoirs of the apostles. So at 150, there was no Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John as far as the Gospels being concerned, named individually. It was just a collection of writings that Justin Martyr decided should be the canon. So anything before that, all these other Gospels and writings that were floating around before that, were read widely by many different people. And this is why you had Gnostic Christians and the Marcions and all these other variations of Christianity in the same way you do today that you had back then. So as far as an eyewitness, there were no eyewitness accounts. Even at best, it was written by somebody who was listening to somebody else. So I'm listening to Peter and I'm writing down what Peter said. I am listening to Matthew and I'm writing down what Matthew said. And the Papias was actually just a list of sayings, much like the Gospel of Thomas. So it wasn't a narrative. So that is why that book was not part of your gospel as well, just like the Gospel of Thomas, amongst other things, other reasons why the Gospel of Thomas is not part of your canon. But these things grew over time to be formulated into what you have as the Gospels, added to, taken away from, edited, and all these other different things. So there are no eyewitness accounts. These are somebody who's trying to tell you what somebody else said and what somebody else did decades later, and when you get to the Gospel of John, almost a century later. So there are no eyewitnesses. Even in Paul's writings, when he said there was 500 witnesses to Jesus, this is according to another guy who told him about it, who claimed that he talked to all these other people who saw it, but that person himself still never saw it. So it's not eyewitness account. It's second, third, fourth hand accounts. And that's what your entire Bible is. Second, third, fourth hand accounts, which is why there are so many discrepancies, which is why there are so many contradictions, which is why it is all just one big forgery of a myth in order to create a more docile version of Judaism. But I hope that helps you to start studying on that subject matter. Always remember, you have to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations.